Do you ever find yourself worrying a lot about things that probably won't happen? Lots of people do, and I thought we'd have a little chat about that today. I mean, there's worry and worry, and if we're deep into worry, it can really become sort of paralysing, and it can raise our anxiety levels out of all proportions, bearing in mind that we're not reacting to something that has happened, we're just thinking about something that could happen. And if you take this to extremes so that you find there's a lot of days in your life where you're living in constant anxiety and you're having panic attacks, it's what therapists would probably call catastrophizing. It means that you've heard about something, or something's happened, or something may happen in your life, and you're now imagining the very worst case scenario. You're actually imagining a complete catastrophe, even though you've got no evidence and no grounds for thinking that such a catastrophe would happen. Many years ago, me and a friend decided we'd go to France, and I have a little bit of schoolboy French, not really, I don't speak French, and he'd been to France a couple of times, I think, and he had a little bit more French, but really not enough to hold a conversation. We decided to stay in this restored chateau run by this old couple, and it's like a sort of B&B, a fancy guest house. But the difference was when you sat down for your meal in the evening, you just ate with a couple and the other guests, and obviously all the other guests when we were there could speak French fairly fluently. Now it's true that there is some overlap between English and French, because at one time, I think when the Normans had conquered us, everyone was speaking French anyway here, and then when what we now call English took over, it retained a lot of words that we'd adapted or adopted from French. So you can sometimes get a sense of what's being discussed. But on this evening at the chateau, we hadn't got a clue what was really being discussed. The second night, there was a guest that actually sat next to me and translated when he realised I couldn't understand French. But on the first night, we were sat at the table pretending to, joining the conversation with the odd nod and thing. We hadn't got a clue what's being discussed, or even what people's opinions were about the subjects. We didn't know. That was until the lady who kind of ran the chateau, ran the guest house, in the middle of a French sentence, said the words, "une grande catastrophe." And we all recognise a big catastrophe when we see one. So when therapists talk about the habit of catastrophizing, what they're saying is that you're seeing a huge catastrophe looming in your future, even though you got no evidence to support that, just as we were clueless about what was being discussed in France. As you ponder and worry about the thing that you're worrying about, you don't really have any evidence. You don't have any factual evidence that there's going to be a huge catastrophe. And that's why therapists call it catastrophizing, because the only catastrophe is your thinking. If we look at this chart here, you can plainly see that you can catastrophize or worry about huge amounts of things that will give you great anxiety. And of those things that you're worried about, a very small percentage is something that actually could happen or is likely to happen. But things that actually do happen, that you've been worrying about, there's just such a small percentage of the whole thing that you've been worrying about and imagining the worst catastrophe. And what you've got to remember is that most of us, if we don't take charge, our thinking is managed by a committee in our head. And this committee is made up of voices from our past, influential adults or teachers or parents or whatever, just things that happened or things that were said in our formative years, and they form a committee in our head. And here's the great news: you are actually the chairperson of the committee in your head. You actually set the agenda. You actually say who can speak and who should remain quiet. So when we get all this negative, catastrophic thinking going on, really escalating our anxiety, we really have to sort of bang the hammer, the gavel on the table, and bring the meeting to order. And we have to introduce a more positive voice. And because we've been catastrophized, and of course we might not feel very positive, but we have to analyse, question and interrogate the negative catastrophizing voice. It's making some huge wild assumptions about this could happen, that could happen, and blah blah blah. And when we suffer from catastrophizing, what we're doing is we're not being the chairperson. We just let this loud negative person speak. Now, if you have an actual friend that's always loud and negative, I hope you don't just let them take control of every conversation, drain the flipping life out of you with their negativity. I mean, either get them to change or talk about something else, or be more positive, or clear off and don't have them as a friend. I certainly don't want a lot of negative people in my life. I mean, I speak from experience. This is something that I've suffered from in the past and still do a little bit now, but try and take control of it, acknowledge that I'm catastrophizing, and actually think of more positive outcomes. If I tell you that for the next 60 seconds you mustn't think about a white polar bear, what did you just think about? You immediately thought about a white polar bear, didn't you? Admit it. And that's because I put some words in your head and your mind immediately went to that thing. So what we've got to do is actually put some positive words or positive thoughts into our head, think about great positive outcomes of whatever we're wrestling with. But to be honest, most of the time catastrophizing is so out there and so unlikely to happen, it's not even worth discussing any outcome. It's better just to think about something else. I'm stood next to a river. There's no rail here, so catastrophizing would be like this decking is quite slippy, the bank is muddy. If I don't move on, I could slip down the bank, I could fall in the river. I can swim, but what if the current's strong? I could drown and I could be dead, and perhaps I'd be washed to a little place where nobody came for days and nobody would find my body, and then what would my family do? That's catastrophizing. It didn't happen, as you saw, because I moved on. It's just not realistic. And we've got to, you and I have got to take charge, realise that we're chairing the meeting of the committee in our head, and we need to bang that gavel a few times, bang the hammer, bring the meeting to order, and tell the voices in our head that actually the agenda is changed and we're thinking and discussing about something wonderful, new and positive. Let me know if this video has kind of struck a chord with you. Do you find yourself worrying about things that never happen? And would you say that you catastrophize sometimes? Let me know, or is it just me? I don't think it is. Yeah, leave a comment below, and hope you found this video helpful. If you did, as usual, give it a thumbs up. That helps me on YouTube, get the video to more people, and then hit that red subscribe button and the little bell icon, and you get notifications of similar videos in the future. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.